So here is the magic that we are talking about. But don't skip, please. Do not skip. I am of course joking, since this is something else entirely. Hello and welcome to the channel. This is Gone with Gandalf, and Happy New Year to all of you. And here is an appropriately themed video on magic in Middle-earth, and I use that as a loose term since a lot of what you or I may call magic in Middle-earth is, but then isn't. Before I explain myself, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, or There and Back Again, were both written by Frodo and Bilbo Baggins in the Book of West March, and so has their views kind of in the text as they've written it, or embedded, if you like. Hobbits, like you and I, are not long-lived as the elves, or are they as knowledgeable like the descendants of Númenor, or the Dunedain. And they have been isolated from much of the fantastical elements of Middle-earth, to the point that they are barely even mentioned in the tales of other races, and they mostly fear wolves, which is quite average in this kind of fantasy land. So we are hobbits, the youngest race, and therefore the least learned of lore, and therefore what is actually possible. And also we have hairy feet. You might know someone who has a lot in common with that. As we know in the real world, that magic tricks are amazing for the first pass, but once you are shown how, then it becomes simple and largely unremarkable. Excuse me, sorry. This is a good stance to take when looking at the wonders and magic performed in Lord of the Rings, and indeed Galadriel even says to Frodo by the mirror in Lothlorien that it is something that hobbits would probably deem magic, but this is only because the hobbits and us fools reading are too young in the world to know or understand the explanation, so she doesn't obviously bother giving us one. But what then is the more obvious magic? Well, the One Ring turning the wearer invisible is quite obvious, apart from Sauron, but then there are the ring wraiths with the lack of a physical body as a result of their spirit being tied to the world of the living due to the power of the 9 rings that they all have, which is, so they're in the wraith section of beings. One of the most iconic scenes though in the movies was Gandalf and the Balrog Durin's Bane basing off on the bridge of Khazad-dûm, which is certainly the closest we get to any of that J.K. Potter stuff, although the scene of Gandalf saving the retreat of the forces of Osgiliath on the Pelennor is another one, although obviously very much built up for the cinema screen. And then another one is the flood of the Bruinen to flush away the ring wraiths off the porch of Elrond in Rivendell. So we can safely say that big boy stuff is in the locker when needed, but only when it is absolutely required. But what of the less obvious magic? Well, the one I already mentioned was the mirror of Galadriel. That worked like the magic mirrors of fairy tales, showing things that may or may not happen in the future, which is certainly more of a versatile tool than the Palantiri or the Seeing Stones that were housed in various Dunedain locations originally, that are hard to explain to a hobbit that doesn't have access to FaceTime, although they didn't all have each other's numbers, so there is that. An unexplained moment is when Frodo uses his elvish gadget from Lothlorien in Shelob's lair, and seemingly knew and then didn't know how he set a liquid-filled phial alight with a high elvish incantation, which was Aya Rendil Elenion Ankalima, or Hail Rendil brightest of stars. And yes, I did just add this bit in so I could twiddle my metaphorical moustache. The star certainly aligned for him there because he wasn't finding the switch himself. This is probably one of those greater power or Iluvatar intervention, or Iluvatar is like God, moments that I plan on doing a separate video on in the near future. So think about becoming a subscriber, and you can comment also in the future about how you were a single-digit subscriber. So yeah, please do. Thank you. Okay, you done? Okay. Indeed, not even the everyday promise is just a promise anymore, because oaths are sacred, and a promise such as that, once made, is not easily broken. Examples of this are the one Fëanor swore with his sons to retrieve the Silmarils, which caused all of their deaths, a substantial amount of their kin's death, and the destruction of Beleriand in the first stage. And then there was the oath of the men of the mountain to Isildur upon the stone of Eric. So this was then only broken then by Aragorn in the late Third Age, when they went off to fight against the force of Sauron. And then there's the prophecy of Glorfindel of Gondolin, who was an elf, and he said, well, he was the first one to say that no man will kill the Witch King, and of course he ended up being correct, with it being Meriadoc Brandybuck, or just Merry, a hobbit who stabbed the Witch King with a blade found in a barrow of a former Dunedain lord in the Barrow Downs. Found the blade in the Barrow Downs, sorry. And Eowyn, who was a Rohirric shield maiden who stabbed him in the face. Although then there are more dubious additions here, such as the subtleties of Saruman's voice. By the way, what an amazing fit Sir Christopher Lee's voice was. So good, in fact, that even the Witch King and Treebeard were swayed by its command. Is that magic? Or the preservation of Rivendell? Of Lothlorien? Yes, those last two are actually definitely, absolutely magic, or magic. Those were air quotes. Later shown to be due to the powers of the 3 Elven Rings of Power. All in all, magic, though, is not a driving factor in the Legendarium, and is often just something that is complex in nature that only the learned would know. So, well, if they're mortal, since to generally be very old, as the elves to have sought the knowledge from the Ainur, for example, back in the ye old days in Valinor. But since the hobbits and we, the readers, are dumb, we've just kind of come into this world, really. So we're as dumb as can be to these ancients that know, of all that is possible. It all kind of seems like magic, and although, having said this, 90% of particularly elvish medicine seems to be based around a weed, so they're not that learned maybe. But so to my friend that asked me recently, and also the reason why I made this video, why don't they use magic more in the films? Well, magic may not actually be magic at all, and is just advancement in knowledge, where an explanation is just too tiresome and long to give. So maybe, just maybe, go and rewatch the films, because they're brilliant, or read the book, but just watch the films 10 times. So thank you very much if you are still here and watching. Apologies for the sound quality, because I'm trying to be quite quiet, and I have very limited resources, and there are some other people in the house, and this microphone picks up absolutely everything. But I have made plans for future videos already, so there won't be as long of a break Fingers crossed. But for now, this has been Gone with Gandalf, and good day.